meetings ago, Brad gave a talk, and it was about networking, specifically tips for introverts. And Chad and I, as two introverts, found ourselves later that evening discussing Brad's talk and what we found helpful in it. But there was a particular part of Brad's speech that I found myself, while Brad was talking, going to a place of being defensive. Brad gave a tip to men that as they are approaching a woman in a networking setting, especially if the woman is by herself, that it can be a good idea to mention a significant other's name early in the conversation so that the woman does not assume that the man's motives are impure, that he might be hitting on her. And so I was talking about this with Chad because I was curious what his reaction was. I knew what my reaction was to this. And Chad shared with me that he actually found that tip to be very helpful. And again, I found myself getting defensive, bristled, if you will. I said, okay, tell me more. Well, in the past, Chad had an experience where he was in a job interview with a woman. And he noticed a picture on her desk of her and a man, and the picture clearly showed that they were a couple. Chad recognized the man from the woman's website as another trainer at her studio. And so he said, oh, is that your boyfriend? The woman took that as that Chad was fishing for information so that he could hit on her. He clearly was not trying to hit on this woman in this interaction. They cleared it up, he got the job, they worked together for many years, and all was fine. So I'm listening to Chad's story, and I know Chad's a good guy. And I hear Brad give this tip, and I know Brad's a good guy. But yet I still find myself in this place of feeling defensive for the woman. Because women just don't assume that a man is hitting on her unless he has said something suggestive or looked at her suggestively. And then I stopped. And I thought, wow, we're all just making a lot of assumptions about each other. And we're showing up in our defense with these assumptions. Woman assumes man is hitting on her. Man then course corrects, so that doesn't happen again. Woman, overhearing the plan to course correct, assumes the man has done something wrong, if that's the assumption the woman is making. And around we go in this cycle of assumptions. And really all it leads to is you and me being a bunch of asses. There's an epidemic of defensiveness going on in our society today, and it's showing up in a lot of different places. Not just between men and women, but it's showing up between political parties, it's showing up between religious groups, nationalities, ethnicities, communities, you name it. We are really armored up today. We're showing up defensive, ready for the battle. But the reality is there's not really a battle to be fighting. And it's not really getting us anywhere being so defensive with each other. I really had to check myself and why I was showing up so defensive in many different interactions that didn't require it. I want to just talk, though, about this interaction between men and women today. As a woman, my perspective, and I think the other women in this room, this may resonate with you. We have to stop lumping the good guys and the bad guys all together. Case in point. I was at a professional lunch recently. Not that it matters, but please note, professional lunch. I was speaking to a woman that was a couple seats away from me, so I was kneeling on a chair to lean in closer to her. A man walked up and said to me, I can only assume because you're kneeling on my chair that you plan to sit in my lap. I saw a lot of eyebrows raised just then, mostly women. I looked at him and I said, nope, and excuse me, and I sat down. I wasn't overly offended in the moment. I wasn't defensive. I just thought it was a really boneheaded thing that he said to me. But the woman I was speaking with, very offended. All the women I told this story to, very offended. I decided, though, to share it with the owner of my company a couple days later, a man around the same age as this gentleman who knows this gentleman. And I just was really curious what his reaction would be. So I shared it with him, and he looked me dead in the face, and he said, that is not okay that he said that to you. He said, I don't care if you were offended or not offended. It is not okay that that was said to you, because it never would have been said to me. And I thought, yes, good guy. I am so fortunate that I am surrounded by good men. And I have to stop assuming that the good men are the bad guys. Now, it's hard for me to speak to the man side of this argument, not being a man. But what I would ask of men in this cycle of defensiveness we're caught in is to please stop showing up defensive. Chad had every right to be offended when that woman accused him of hitting on her, because he was not hitting on her. But what I hope as we go forward is that we move quickly from a place of being offended and defensive to a place of curiosity. Why did the woman make that assumption? What has been said to her in the past or suggested to her in the past that caused her to immediately go to that assumption? You see, we have to be really curious about each other's experiences. We can't keep making assumptions that just because somebody says something boneheaded, they're a bad person and they're on the wrong side of all of this. It's an epidemic of defensiveness, and it's these cycles of assumption that we just keep spinning around and around and around in. And we can stay there. It'll work. But again, if we do, you and me, we're just asses. Thank you.